Hello there, and thanks for joining us. Today I'm continuing my look at the wines from Vignobles Rollet. Again, the wine I'm looking at is a Saint Emilion Grand Cru, and this time it's Chateau du Vieux-Guinot. So this is an estate that's been owned by the Rollet family since 1729, making them one of the older proprietors in the Saint Emilion region. The estate's a 12-hectare estate, so a pretty typical size for a Saint Emilion property. It's planted predominantly to Merlot, about 80% of the plantings are Merlot, and the balance is Cabernet Franc. The soils here tend to be clay loams with a limestone subsoil. The vines have an average age of 35 years, and since 1985 the family have been practicing something they refer to as reasonable culture. And although that carries no certification, I see that as being an approach to sustainability. Certainly they're only employing organic fertilisers. Another interesting thing they've been doing is working with a pruning expert, Michel Duclos, and they believe they've now worked their vineyards in a way that they're less prone to disease as a result of pruning properly. In 2006, Hélène Rollet took over the management of estates from her father Jean-Pierre, who'd managed them since 1949, I believe. And in 2007, Hélène employed Michel Rollet as a consultant, and they still work with his consultancy to try and improve the quality of their wines. And I think those improvements are being seen in the wines we're looking at today. One of the other moves they've made is to acquire HVE3 certification, which is a certification for sustainable vineyard management for high environmental value. Since 1983, they've believed in increasing planting densities, not high density planting, but to about 5,500 hectares, which will be higher than many. I believe vineyards here, which are on quite flat land near Saint-Etienne, which is about 4 or 5 kilometres southwest of the town of St Emilion. The fact that the vineyards are flat makes it quite easy to machine harvest, so I believe they still use that approach. Fermentation goes on in epoxy-lined cement tanks, each of which is equipped with temperature regulation and also for micro-oxygenation to enable a thin bead of oxygen to be bubbled through the wine, just to help polymerise tannins, stabilise those tannins, make them smoother, and to help retain the colour. 2022 made some really attractive wines in St Emilion. Thankfully the water table was good and full because it was quite a dry and relatively warm vintage. And in fact, between May and October, it was really only June that actually saw any rain. So healthy fruit was able to be picked in good conditions in September and October. I don't actually have figures for the blend for this wine, but the vineyard planting, as I say, is 80% Merlot with 20% of Cabernet Franc. So I would assume the blend pretty much follows that. Aging went on in French oak barrels, 50% of which were new, for a period of 12 months. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? I'm looking at a wine here that is virtually opaque. I can just make out the stem of the glass through the wine. It's a sort of quite a dark, almost black ruby. There are some hints of purple at the rim, but only just. As is typical for a Merlot-dominated wine. Alcohol is reasonably high, it's at 14%, and it's clinging to the glass fairly readily and slowly forming tears that are falling back into the glass. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are a sort of a dusty red plum note. There's quite a richness in that. The aromas are a little restrained, but it's quite a typical Saint Emilion nose. So let's have a taste. On the palate there's some nice freshness, there's smoothness, there's plummy flavours and plummy textures. Almost a hint of over-ripeness heading through to a sort of a prune note. The wine's of sort of medium to full body. There's a nice concentration, but that's combined with freshness. There are almost some sort of raisiny hints there. Also a little bit of elegant sort of rose petal, maybe floral, red fruit perfume. The acidity is keeping the finish nice and fresh. The wine doesn't have any great complexity. Its tannins are smooth, they provide a little bit of grip, but they're not particularly drying. The oak here is well integrated, it's not sticking out as obvious cedary flavours. There it's much more in the texture. It's a pleasantly rounded wine. It's quite smooth, it has some elegance in its structure and the freshness of its flavours on what is quite a long finish. The alcohol seems balanced, it doesn't seem particularly hot. It's adding perhaps a little bit of roundness to the back palate. But the wine's virtue is the lovely freshness and quite vivid ummy notes on the mid and back palate. This is quite a nicely made St Emilion Grand Cru. Looking at the Wine Search aggregated critic score, we don't have one for this vintage as of yet. We do have an overall score which is 85 out of 100, which I think is unfortunate for this wine because I think this is an estate that's improved over the last few years. I would probably score this much more as an 87 or an 88, and that's the kind of wine that I think would be very enjoyable for everyday drinking and sociable and family occasions. So thank you very much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. That would really help us. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, do please sign up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It would be great to have your support there. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do feel free to pass it on to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop them in the box below. I'd love to hear what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. Once again, thanks for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time, come and join us for another tasting again in the near future. Till then, bye for now.